Hello and welcome to another edition of Turned Out a Punk. I'm your host, Damian Abraham, and today on the show, someone I've wanted to talk to for, decades at this point, Eric Ozenne. You might know him from the Nerve Agents. You may know him from Redemption 87. You might know him from his fantastic new band with former guest of the show, Jade, Birdlegs. But for me, he was my teenage hero in the band Unit Pride. We talk about all this and more in a second. Definitely check out Birdlegs, though, his new band. They have a fantastic new-ish LP this year on Revelation Records called Visions Beyond the Ape Cave. Pick this thing up. It is great. If you haven't already, check out Nerve Agents. If you haven't already, check out Redemption 87 and Unit Pride. Check out everything Eric's done. Eric's one of these vocalists, as we talk about in this episode, where you can kind of track his progression as a vocalist over the course of his career in all these different bands. And he's someone who, it's someone I've wanted to talk to for a very long time. I don't know what else to say. This is a big one for me, and it's a longer one. So I'm not going to ramble on too much longer. Check out Revelation. There's going to be links, of course, to get the LP for Visions Beyond the Ape Cave down below. I still have never seen Eric perform live, so if you are given the opportunity before me, I will live vicariously through you. Check them out any chance you get to see them play live. I will do the same. And until that time, I really don't have that much more to say other than, huge shout out to Mark Hurst for helping me get Timmy Pride into a band with me. That'll make more sense when we talk about this band later on in the show, but thank you, Mark Hurst. And that's it. So sit back, relax, and enjoy Eric Ozenne on Turned Out a Punk. Eric, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, as I was sparing you from off air, I've been a huge fan of yours for a very long time. And I didn't even remember this until just before we got on air, but way back when, As We Once Were, who eventually became the band No Warning, who Ben wound up being in Fucked Up for a while, on their demo tape, they cover Unit Pride. So the roots of Unit Pride run very deep in Toronto.
Very cool. Very cool. Do you know what song that was?
I was just actually, I can dig out the demo, but I think actually I have it in my notes. All in the Head.
Okay. Yeah. I love, that was one of my favorite songs to play. That's really great. I'd love to hear that.
Well, we'll get into all that, but I this is not going to be about me and my love for Unit Pride, which I'm sure will seep into this conversation. This is about you, Eric, and I got to start it off the way they all start off, which is, Eric, how'd you get into punk? Do you remember the first time you ever came across it?
Yeah. Well, I think for me, it was, I was kind of cruising through the whole like new wave goth period of my life, which was in middle school. And, for me, I was a pretty screwy young kid and running around and just kind of being really rebellious. So I think when I first heard, when I was 12, I got the Clash Combat Rock album, and along with Flock of Seagulls first album on cassette for my Sony Walkman that I got almost as a package for Christmas when I was 12. So that would be my first time listening to like the Clash, right? But then I got into the Sex Pistols soon after, like that. I think it was probably about a year later, because I started skateboarding, and at that point I was pretty much kind of rolling with this crew of people that had older brothers, and these older brothers had bands in the valley that I grew up in. And so one of these guys I was with, he gave me like a Sex Pistols listen, and so I heard that. I was like, this is amazing. But like right on top of that, I got a mixtape from somebody from one of those bands, and he gave me a mixtape of, it was like 7 Seconds The Crew. It was like the first Social D record. It was like Circle Jerks. God, I think there's some other stuff on there, but those are the three that I really remember. And I really took to that. I mean, it really like spoke to me. It's like, oh, this is this is how I feel, right? Like it was really like that's how I felt. That mixtape was perfect for me at the time.
What were these guys' bands called? Did any of them wind up recording or doing anything else in music?
I don't think any of them recorded, but so they were pretty instrumental in really like pulling me into punk because these guys. So there was Kevin Hay, who actually lives up here in Portland, Oregon, and we're both from the Bay Area, so it's kind of a trip. So he had a car and he drove people around, and he was like a junior in high school, maybe even a senior when I sort of came in out of middle school into my freshman year. And I used to cut school and go hang out in the back of his car while he was in class at this other high school. And I'd sit back there and smoke cigarettes and just, be just like this crusty little punk kid. And he would play all kinds of music back then, a lot of the same kind of stuff, like the Social D stuff, Christ on Parade, the Circle Jerks, Descendants, all that kind of stuff. Um, when he would be in the car, because everybody'd come back to the car and smoke and hang out or go to the store real quick between classes. And I would just do that all day long and just sit in the back of his car. And so then and he was in a band called No Comment, and he was a singer and he had a mohawk. So he was like the coolest guy in the world, right? And I totally looked up to him. And then there was this guy, Mark, who was in another band called Shattered Youth. And those were the two main bands from my area of the Valley. And they were all like these super cool guys because they were all like juniors and seniors in high school. And I just looked up to all of them. But Mark had given me that mixtape that I was talking about. And so from there on, I was just being dragged around to shows by some of them in cars. Some of their friends had cars. And sometimes I'd take like the BART train and just kind of like immerse myself in all of that as much as I could at 14, 15 years old, whatever I was.
That's awesome. I love the fact
Yeah.
that like No Comment, Unit Pride, Crimp Shrine, like all you guys are happening at the same time, but everyone's kind of doing something a little bit different.
Oh, different band.
It's a
Different
different No Comment?
different no comment. Yeah. I was like, wait, what are we talking about? Yeah. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of no comments I've found over the years because I'm like, wait, is that the no comment from my youth? But it never turns out to be. But there's tons of those bands running around. I mean, it's like, naming your kid John, right? Like there's so many Johns running around, right? So no comment is like the punk name that would be the equivalent of the name John or Mike or something like that.
But you must have played with other Bay Area No Comment at some point too, I would imagine. I think I've seen Unit Pride No Comment flyers.
I don't I don't
No.
remember that. I think I would have really remembered playing with a band called No Comment at that time because that band from Danville, California was so prominent in my life growing up that I would have been like, "Oh, weird." But I don't think I remember that, you know.
But well, you guys probably play with Sticky, I would imagine, right?
Oh, I think we played with Sticky once, and they were on like a ton of shows because they were part of that inner core of the Gilman Street scene. Sticky, Isocracy, Operation Ivy, Crimp Shrine, all these bands were like part of that inner, almost like the inner circle of the venue. So,
What was the first show you went to?
well, it was a no comment show with Carolina Rainbow in a church, but that wasn't like a proper venue. So what I always like to say is that my first actual show at like a venue was at the Farm in San Francisco, and I saw it was Christ on Parade opened. This was with Barry singing, so this is like the Sounds of Nature first era Christ on Parade, which is awesome. And these guys were like ripped up clothes, mohawks, side hawks, all kinds of hawks. It was awesome, and I fell in love with that band because of that. And then the Knot, NOT,
Yeah.
yeah, they played, and then it was the Descendants, 7 Seconds, and Circle Jerks. That was my first show.
Damn, what a show.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
was what was the crowd like at that show? Because I've heard San Francisco was kind of hairy for shows in the 80s.
yeah. Especially at that venue too, because it was alongside a park, and it was way out in the Mission. and it was a little dicey, especially if you're like walking and you're like young kids. But we would take the BART train over sometimes and walk through that park. And God, I can't remember the name of the park, but it was right outside the farm connected to it, because I think the farm was like a co-op, like an actual farm. I think they did some farm stuff and put on shows at night or something like that. Um, but yeah, so going to those shows, you had a lot of people in this park, and it was super dark. And I remember somebody got stabbed in that park, and we used to walk through and be freaked out we were going to get stabbed because somebody got stabbed outside of a show. And we would go, and for us being younger, it was really kind of a trip because everybody was so much older than us. We were like, when I was going to the farm, I was like 14, 15 years old. And so everybody just looked big and scary. They all had ripped up jeans, and they had their flannels tied around their waist, and you'd see them with their leather jackets and their huge boots. And then when you go inside, I always would end up at like really packed shows. So those shows were super packed, and like then there would be this pit, and just like people just like throwing fists and just like circling it up, and a lot of fights. A lot of that heavy violence that you hear about from the hardcore of that time.
Yeah, when Jade was on the show, he talked about going to see, I think it was Green Day opening for MDC at like a super early Green Day post Sweet Children era show, and just like how violent that show got, with Nazi skinheads showing up to try and get MDC, and
oh yeah.
And then you also hear stories about the fuck ups and kind of like the crew that existed around the fuck ups and Foul Records. Do you have any run-ins with either of those elements?
Not the fuck up elements. That's a whole different thing. I never really came across that scene, but I'm familiar. But the skinheads, so the SF skins used to terrorize and come to the shows and steal people's boots. Like Grant from Unit Pride got his boots stolen, his Doc Martens stolen at the Rock on Broadway on up in North Beach. And we were at like a victim's family show maybe. And like they just came in and they just kind of walked through, and then they just like circled around and said, "Give me your boots," that kind of thing. But there was always stories about people running into SF skins, getting beat up. And I remember at Gilman Street, there's like the famous like skins coming in the big 4-wheel drive truck. And like they came out and they were ready to fight. And then everybody showed up with like bats and rallied and had like garbage pail lids and, chains that they pulled from somewhere and took them on and scared them all away. But the only time that I ran into like an SF, or not an SF skins, I'm not sure which skinhead group this was, but they did show up at Gilman Street, and it was not the famous story you always hear about, the one I was just talking about. It was a different one where they showed up and everybody came outside. There was kind of a standoff and kind of scared them away because there's too many people at the show that were like, because Gilman Street was like, as a collective, like people were on the same page, even though they kind of weren't, they were, you know what I mean? Like nobody wanted that violence. Everybody was there to be peaceful and just like have a good time and really kind of like be in that community and do what we were doing. But nobody wanted fights. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's so fascinating with the Gilman, the history of that place. Like how many, like when you read that, well, I think it's actually in this, I've got it beside me here, but the Give Me Something Better book.
Oh yeah.
So many stories where you're like, well, that would probably shut down a normal venue.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of those stories in that book.
Yeah, because when you said the famous skinhead altercation, I'm like, is that the one you're describing, or is that the one with like Sammy from All Bets Off? That famous photo where he's cracking the guy over the head. We're about to.
That would have been a different one. That's a whole nother story.
Yeah, there's just so many. It just feels like this. It's such a storied venue, and has had to literally fight to exist many times.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a whole different thing now. I'm so glad it's still around, and just thankful that people have been able to kind of put money into that place to kind of keep it going. But Yeah, it was almost like every weekend it was going to be shut down. And, you always heard, oh, Gilman shut down, and then it would be closed for the weekend. And then, you'd come back and it'd be open again for some reason. And, it was just really kind of, you were always kind of on pins and needles about the closing of your beloved like place that you go see shows, right? And for us growing up in that place, it was like, I mean, because that's kind of like my high school for me. Like when I look at like the Turn It Around documentary that they did, I'm like, this is like my video yearbook. This is crazy. I'm just not in it. So
Well, you would have been like Unit Pride would have been going, right? Probably by the time the Gilman starts.
oh yeah. When we were already a band when Gilman opened its doors. And soon after it opened its doors, we got a show in May of '87 with Blast. And it was like somehow we landed the opening spot on this bill with this band that we loved because of the Power of Expression album that was out on like Wishing Well. Yeah, it was amazing. And it was like packed. And so we get to play in front of all these people and no, like we were just this little dinky band from nowhere, really. And so we get to go and play the show that Tim Yohannan just like slapped us on. And next thing you know, we've got people coming to our next show who we didn't even know because it was such a big show. It was really great.
Where were you guys kind of playing before that opens? Did you guys play the farm?
No, no. Gilman was our first big show. So in the farm, I think at that time was actually maybe it was done at that point, but it closed its doors right around the same time. So like the farm chapter kind of closes and then the Gilman chapter sort of opens at that same time frame. But yeah, we were just doing like garage stuff, house party kind of stuff. I think we played like an art center or something like that out in the valley. Everything was out in the valley, because we were from like the East Bay. So yeah.
You mentioned Tim Yohannan there, and I find a lot of the bands, particularly the bands from New York and the East Coast bands from that era, have like a real beef with him for a variety of reasons, be it Agnostic Front or the guys from Youth of Today.
Mhm.
What was his relationship like with you guys?
Yeah, it's really interesting to ask that question because we had like, so I was the one that kind of interfaced with Tim Yohannan for, I think just because I was the one that became the person calling Gilman Street the first time. And so kind of the way you did it is you got them your demo tape, they listened to it, and then you called and said, hey, do you listen to my demo tape? Can we get on a show? Or they would immediately call you back and say, we want you to play the show. So Tim put us on that Blast show right after he heard our demo tape, and our demo tape was terrible. It was really horrible, but he booked a lot of really horrible bands back then. So, we're just kind of one of many.
I like the demo, but I will let you criticize your own work.
The first Unit Pride demo?
I don't know, the one which has got kind of like the classic.
Oh, is it it's like a soldier. It's like a washed out, like, so that's the cover of I think it's the cover. No, it's not the cover. There's a Unit Pride book where the name was taken from, like a war fiction novel that Pete Tisa, our drummer, got it from when we switched our name from Misled Children to Unit Pride. That's what we came up with. So we had all this like soldier imagery with our stuff. But yeah, that one I don't know if that's the first one. I think the first one just had the Unit Pride letters on it.
I don't think I've ever even seen a copy of that.
Well, hopefully you haven't. It's got like Atoms for Peace on it, which is like, it's just terrible. It's just really terrible. Atoms for Peace, Fuck the Flags. God, Eminent Front is probably on there. Yeah. If you're not familiar with those, then you probably haven't heard it. So
sorry,
yeah.
but I didn't mean to cut you off. You were talking about Tim Yohannan, and
yeah. So we get him a demo tape, and then he calls us back. He gets us on the Blast show, and so after that, I think that he liked us, like, or has a soft spot for us for some reason. Maybe it's because we were so young. I don't know. But he would put us on. So from 87 to 89, when Unit Pride was pretty much around, he put us on like so many Operation Ivy shows. And I think sometimes that had to do with Operation Ivy because they became our friends. And even though we didn't kind of line up musically in the same way, like we would hang out with Tim Armstrong when he was called Lint outside, and whenever we would roll up, he'd come hang out with us, and like we just kind of buddied up with them in this weird, strange way because they were older than us. They were like 3 years older than us or so. Um, so between Tim Yohannan just always giving us these great shows. He'd put us on all the Youth of Today shows that came through, any of the kind of like hardcore shows that would come through, which was kind of rare, really. The youth crew kind of shows is what I'm talking about. We would be on those, so it was like an automatic. But yeah, so he had somewhat of a soft spot for us. We were like these young kids that started out not straight edge, came straight edge, and kind of wore the costume of straight edge. And I don't think he cared for that so much. I mean, he was not a straight edge guy at all, and he was very like sort of socialist oriented, and we weren't that at all. We were over here sort of doing our own weird thing, and we were really not the most well received within the like inner core of Gilman Street people. I think because we were straight edge, we had kind of rules, right? And they were kind of not about rules, yet at the same time Gilman Street was all about rules. Like there were a lot of like just rules of being respectful of each other, and there's just like you had to really kind of watch your tone with things. You couldn't be inappropriate, as very PC as everybody would say. And that's what made that place be the way that it was, though, right? Is everybody felt safe there.
Yeah, like I really feel like that's when the politics of DIY hardcore and punk rock really kind of get solidified in because like obviously DC
Mhm.
Revolution Summer, you sort of have that sort of political awareness
Yeah.
become a thing, but I think it's really that Gilman, like that idea of like the rules of Gilman, and these are the rules that we need to kind of follow to keep these shows happening,
Yeah.
and it's I think that's why I've also loved Unit Pride so much, is because you guys are such a weird outlier in that place, because it's such
Yeah.
like, first of all, it's such a weedy scene. Like there's so many people that are involved in weed and that and that punk scene at that time.
Yeah.
And I feel like you must have been, and there's also bands that are straight up adversarial to straight edge, like Blatz and stuff, like that have anti-straight
Mhm.
edge songs. So
Yeah.
it must have been a weird fit at every show you're playing in that place.
Well, so I mean, we weren't really playing around Blatz at the time, but like all of those bands, even though there was kind of a verbal through the music, lyrics, and things like that sort of adversarial thing, I think it's just speaking on things they're frustrated with or want to be adversarial with on intentionally, right? And and I think there was a lot of that going on because we had a lot of kind of adversarial sort of other bands from other places, like um, but at the same time, this is what I want to say, was that we all got along. Nobody hated each other, right? Like these people that we didn't really know who were like, fuck straight edge, that kind of thing. They were still cool. We were all there for Operation Ivy. We were all like hanging out and, being sort of respectful in the crowd together. Right. And, we would hang out and talk and we would sort of jive at each other. And, there's just a lot of, I think just in punk rock in general, like people are trying to instigate with each other and needle each other. I mean, we see it in hardcore, right? Where people are kind of doing that with each other. And it doesn't really go super deep where like people hate each other. It's a
Yeah,
more like a conversation of sorts, I would say.
I agree. I definitely
Yeah.
think, and I think humor and parody is so intrinsic to punk, like going
Mhm.
back to the very inception of it, where it's kind of hard to tell sometimes who's joking and who's being serious in
Yeah.
the way they're presenting themselves. And I think
Mhm.
that's such a part of what this thing is. And like you're saying, there is this sort of like needling, and there's like bands like Grudge that are doing straight up straight edge parody records back
Mhm.
then, and there's straight edge parody bands like Crucial Youth that are kind of straight edge dudes too that are also doing
I
parody things.
I have a great story about Crucial Youth. So I'm reading Maximum Rock and Roll. One day there's this ad, and I'm in Unit Pride. I'm freshly straight edge, right? I'm looking for any like glimmer of straight edge across the world through Maximum Rock and Roll because it's all you've got at the time, right? And here's this incredibly positive, like do your sit ups and drink your milk kind of stuff. I was like, yes, another band. Like I was super excited. So I throw down my $3 for the 7 inch and order. I think I even bought a t-shirt or something. And I get it back and I realize they're making fun of everything. And I was like, what? I was like crushed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I could
Yeah.
definitely that'll bum me out.
Yeah. I shouldn't have shared that, but I
No, that's awesome.
did.
Uh, I told you I was a big Unit Pride fan, so much so that I collected a member of Unit Pride and started a band with him at one point. Um,
Yes, I've heard this.
when did you first meet our shared band member Tim Monroe?
Yeah. So Tim Monroe and so I was riding the bus one day and the great thing about Tim is, I mean, Tim, you just love his personality. He's got like this dry humor. He's very like snarky, and he's just this like punk dude that I see on the bus one day, and he's got a shaved head, and he's got this little bush just sticking off the front like a little ball. I was like, what in the hell is that? And he's got like his hat on backwards, and he's with this other guy, Brad Albee, and they both went to school together. And Brad was more kind of like, I think, goth leaning. But I think they both had skateboards, but I had a skateboard, and so we started talking on the bus. And I don't know how we ended up connecting after that, but we must have switched phone numbers or something. But then we started hanging out, and Tim was like pretty much for so many years my best friend growing up through that time. And he was just always there for me, just like such a great guy. And he's the one that really got me into like hardcore in the sense of like pushing 7 seconds, pushing bold, really, like pushing all the youth crew stuff because he had it first, and he was huge Crippled Youth fan. And like that was like his thing was Crippled Youth, Bold. That was his band. And it was super fun because it was just fun. Yeah.
The other thing I found really interesting is I was going through the lyric sheet on the 7 inch today, and you name as an influence, amongst other things, Antidote.
Hmm.
Where would you guys have been hearing the Antidote 7 inch? Because I imagine that would have been kind of a harder record to come by.
Yeah. Well, okay. I kind of have to sort of go back a little bit. So and this actually comes from Tim. So Tim Monroe, guitar player for Unit Pride, gives me a mixtape with, I don't know what was on it, but Youth of Today was on it because we were going to go see this band, Youth of Today, at Gilman Street in 1987, and they were on their Break Down the Walls tour. And so I had not heard them before until he gave me that tape. So he said, listen to this. We're going to go see this band. And so it's got a bunch of stuff on it. And so we go and we see Youth of Today at Gilman Street, and I'm completely floored by this. Like I'd never seen a band like them, and they were just like so on it. They were just so like, to me, they were like so like aggressive. They were hard. I loved the vocals. I loved like all the energy, and just like there was I picked up a lot of sincerity from Ray Capo talking between songs and just like what they were about. I was like, this is what this is what I'm about, right? Like, and this is before Unit Pride is like the band Unit Pride as. We were still like into RKL and DI and all that kind of stuff. But once we all saw Youth of Today, we're all kind of taken by that. And I think Tim might have seen Youth of Today the year before at the New Method when they came through, but I had not. So here I was floored. I hung out with Walter Schreifels pretty much that whole show. And we just kind of buddied around talking about lots of stuff. They ended up staying in the Bay Area through the week, and they were on the Maximum Rock and Roll radio show, and we were listening, and it was like on a Wednesday midweek. And so they're on there being interviewed, I think by Tim Yohannan. And they said, we're going to announce, we're going to play, we're just going to jump on the bill on Saturday with Sticky, who was headlining. And I was like, what? They're going to play again. So we went and saw them again. So we were really infused by Youth of Today during this week. So we started to kind of make inroads and friends and like connected with these people. And so during this last day that they were there, I was talking to Walter and he said, hey, if you ever come to New York, you could stay at my house. I was like, okay, so I'm 16 years old, right? And he's like, I think he was 19 maybe. And I was like, oh yeah, I was planning on coming to New York. I don't know, like maybe in November or something. Just off the cuff saying this to him because I'm like, I'm going to New York, right? Like, and I've never been anywhere. My mom's not going to let me go. There's no way in hell. I'm like a broke person. Like, and so what happens is that I end up like sparing change. I forged one of my mom's checks to make up the difference for the ticket to New York. And I purchased it. I just walked in and like wrote a check and had it already signed by my mom, which was not true. And so I got this ticket to New York. And in November, I show up in New York. Walter picks me up from LaGuardia with his girlfriend. And I go stay at his house. As soon as I walk in the door, his mom is like, your mom's on the phone and she seems kind of mad. Does she know you were coming here? And I was like, oh yeah, we were just in a fight before I left. So, it's fine. So I get on the phone. I was like, hey mom. She's like, what the fuck are you doing in New York? She'd track me down through the phone bill because I had all these calls to Walter on it. This is the only New York number on the phone bill.
Oh, that's amazing.
So I don't tell anybody there that I, basically just jumped ship and went to New York, which by the way, in my mind, my 16-year-old mind, I'm like, I'm going to run away and live with the hardcore guys in New York City and work as a waiter at an Italian restaurant with those red and white checkered tablecloths. And I was just like way out there with my imagination list because I'd never been to New York. I'd never flown anywhere other than Arizona with my family. And, it was like a whole thing. So I go there and suddenly I'm hanging out with Walter like every day. I'm hanging out with Civ. I'm hanging out with like all the Gorilla Biscuit guys over in Jackson Heights and Astoria. And then like I go and hang out with Ray Capo. I go out to lunch with him and get served by John Bloodclot at a Krishna restaurant. I'm like meeting, I think Jules from Side by Side on the corner. I'm driving to Connecticut to the Anthrax to see the Gorilla Biscuits and Matt Bold's in the van. I'm like in a dream, right? Like for a 16-year-old kid that's like really just got into hardcore and like finding it to be the best thing ever. That was like insane. So while I was there, back to your antidote question.
This is the best story. Don't worry. Get there whenever you want.
I basically am getting all of this information, right? I'm hearing about all the bands, Antidote, Straight Ahead, Breakdown, like Token Entry, like all these different bands that I'd never even heard of before. And like getting all this stuff. And I think what I brought there was, I think I brought some Operation Ivy stuff, some Rabid Lassie / Breakaway stuff, to give to them. So I was trading a little bit. We were trading T-shirts, which is what you do. But so I got a lot of that stuff. But the Antidote 7-inch, I didn't have it, but I had it on tape because I got it from them. And I knew that Ray Kappa was really into Antidote. And I love that 7-inch so much. And the straight ahead, demo and I think it was a 7-inch at the time. All that stuff with Youth of Today just like infused me to what I ended up becoming. So that's what I was after.
Was there ever like a big scene for Youth Crew straight edge stuff out in the Gilman or in Berkeley at that time?
No, not at all. It was just Breakaway and Unit Pride as the two hardcore bands. And then, we'd have the SoCal guys come up like Hard Stance, No for an Answer Instead, those bands. But that was kind of rare,
And then that when Unit Pride finally does do that East Coast tour, like you're not in the band by that point, right? Like you left,
no,
right?
Yeah, no, I quit. I quit as that tour was being put together, and everybody was excited to go on it. And I was like, yeah, I'm out. And they're like, what the fuck are you doing? Because they had everything set up for that. And I was like, if you ask anybody from that time, I was really dramatic. And when I would quit the band, and like I quit the band, I think 3 times during like a 2.5-year stretch or something. So, but I quit, and I said, have Corey Sabatini sing, which he did, which didn't work out very well for the band, I think, ultimately, because I think he like really did a number on just interpersonal relationships on that tour.
Yeah, and then I think I actually now have wound up through another person gave me this copy of the 7-inch, which I think was his copy that he gave her. But
oh, really?
He's the reason this was bootlegged, right? Like the 7-inch. That's what I've always heard.
Yeah. He was out in Seattle and hanging out with like John Pettibone and those guys. And I can't remember what he was doing out there, but he was telling everybody he was the singer of Unit Pride. The band wasn't even around anymore, and he wasn't the singer of Unit Pride. He just filled in because I had left. And what had happened is that he somehow, and I don't know how he does this, but he connected with Lost and Found Records in Germany, who was bootlegging everything at the time. And he somehow took the back photo. It was the back photo of the original Unit Pride 7-inch, which on your copy is the front photo.
Yeah, right? It's the back photo on this version of the
yes, 7-inch. There you go. You got that.
I'm not coming here like a poser. I got deep Unit Pride.
You do. You've got it.
It's awesome. Been since I was like 15. This is my hanging out with Walter Schreifels in New York, Eric.
Awesome. I love it. So he takes that photo and he says, look, here I am with the microphone, which is him with the microphone, because he's in the crowd with the microphone, and like my hand is in there with a watch on, and I'm holding Tim's guitar or something like that, but he's got the mic and everybody's piling around it, right? So he's like, that's me, I'm the singer. But he's not on the record, which is crazy. And so he sells it to the guy Burned from Lost and Found for like $1,000. And I'm like, I come back because I was in the Marine Corps. And so I come back and I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, he sold our record. And so I call the guy at Lost and Found. I was like, you can't put that out. And he was just about to release it, right? And I said, you can't put that out. And he's like, they're already made. And I was like, yeah, but you can't put that out. That's not him. That's not legal. And of course, he's in Germany just bootlegging because it's legal to do that over there. And so he goes, I'll tell you what, I'll send you 100 copies of the CD, and just in compensation, because I'm going to put it out, but I feel bad for, what happened. And so I was like, okay, just send me the 100 copies, right? And so I get these 100 copies, and I'm like, what am I gonna do with the 100 copies? Well, I had just gotten back, and I come back into the music scene in the Bay Area again, and so I just started like giving them out. And of course, when I needed money, I'd go sell them as used used copies at the record store because I was broke. But the great thing about it was is that the silver lining in the whole thing was that that actually helped a lot of people hear Unit Pride again. And here we are, it was like 94 when this was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're talking about like what, 6, 7 years or 5 years or something like that since Unit Pride had broken up. So it kind of infused a whole new group of people into this band. And then it actually helped jumpstart Redemption 87 because here was this release that Lost and Found was sort of touting. So it gave us advertisement as a band, even though we weren't around anymore, but it gave me advertisement going into Redemption 87. So, it worked out kind of nice.
Yeah, like I feel like so many of those bootlegs, certainly not justifying these people ripping bands off, but like you're saying, these are spread all over the place. These are winding up in places where otherwise these 7 inches would not have shown up. This one though is weird, the 7-inch bootleg, because I think it's like an American label that did it like a year later, like Point Blank Records out of PA.
Yeah, so that one is like an official record.
Okay.
Yeah. So the Step Forward Records that put out the first 1,000 of that first pressing, they did it, and then kind of that was it. And then I think it was like a couple years later, that record comes out on a different label because they wanted to put it out. So essentially, it's like the legitimate version, but it's not from the first label. It's like it's like what I just did with the Nerve Agents Butterfly Collection record that went from Hellcat Records, and then Revelation put it out for like 3 years on Revelation.
Yeah,
it's the same record.
I will say that Step Forward Records has a pretty spotless roster. Not a ton of records on there, but like Last Option, Wind to Change, and you guys are all killer. And the Free Will record too, actually.
Yeah, I don't know why they didn't really last that long. It could have just been that, we were all like in high school at that time, so college gets in the way,
Yeah, bigger things than keeping these records in press, unfortunately. That's where Lost and Found came in and filled the void with their amazing legal technique of comparing a photo to someone's face, taking their word for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there was a lot of Lost and Found stuff out there that was, I think that I even got my hands on, but it wasn't the most accessible stuff that I remember.
No, and it's also the thing that I find, and also you see this with Grand Theft Audio too. These labels that would do these sometimes dubious releases with band stuff, and then just like have the audacity to go and completely change the graphic design to something horrendous. like it's not bad enough that you're bootlegging, then you have to like throw vinegar into the wound by making it like fuchsia and like orange font or something.
Yeah, no, I hear that. Kind of on the same lines when they did the they did like the 50, I think it was like 50 records. They had the Jason Bush Can Suck It album cover or 7-inch cover for the Unit Pride record.
Yeah.
So, and it had like Calvin from Calvin and the Hobbes. I was like, what the hell is this? I'd never put something like that on the record, but that's what it is. And everybody always talks about that one because they're like, oh, I have that copy. Like, oh, there's only like 50 of those around.
Earlier on, you mentioned Rabid Lassie, who became Breakaway. Was there like some shared membership at all, or is it just like, there's some like crossover, right?
Yeah. So Don, who was in that band, ended up in Unit Pride, and then I think Tim played with Breakaway for a while.
That's what I thought he told me too.
Yeah. So I think Tim played, Don played. So that's two members shared right there. And, it's like half a band. So Joey Vela, singer, uh, Trent, um, Trent played guitar, Jason played guitar, I think Don played bass in Breakaway, and I can't remember the drummer's name. He was always kind of like the person that was never really like hanging out. Um, but yeah, and yeah, I mean, we shared some. I mean, it was a small scene, right? Like even after Unit Pride had broken up and Operation Ivy had broken up, because it's the same time, really. Like I think first part of the year, I think spring. I think spring of '89 is when Operation Ivy broke up, and then of course Unit Pride goes on a summer tour, but they're done after that. So kind of they leave at the same time. And Tim Armstrong actually went to roadie for Unit Pride on that tour. he flew with the band, but then never made it out of New Jersey, so he never like traveled with the band. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
and Jesse does the artwork for the 7-inch too, right?
Yeah. Jesse did the artwork, which just so amazing. I still look at that today and I think it's so cool. And so Jesse, right? Like it's perfectly Jesse art. And I always am so happy that we were able to get something like so cool and so of the time. It's almost like his artwork is like a timestamp of that time.
Mm-hmm.
So just really amazing. And then we were able to put it out on the 12-inch that Igby did on Mankind Records with the 7-inch and the demo attached to it. So it's cool that artwork still exists and people get to still see it. But when Unit Pride broke up and Operation Ivy broke up, the Dance Hall Crashers started. You know that band?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So Grant, who is in Unit Pride, the bass player, and Tim Armstrong, and I think Matt Freeman was in the Dance Hall Crashers when it all first started. And so all these people are sort of combining into this strange ska band, which still is playing today with none of those. Well, I think Jason, who was in Breakaway, is still in Dance Hall Crashers.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
It is like a weirdly, not weirdly, it's awesome how connected that scene is. And then it like, I guess the next wave of bands would be bands like, well, Screw 32, I guess would have been almost like contemporary with Redemption 87, right? And
yeah,
so would have been.
Yeah, because so what happens? So I go away in '89. I come back in '94. So I'm like a huge. I miss like a whole wave of stuff. I miss the Green Day rise. I miss like Econochrist. I missed Filth. You know, like I miss those really great bands that are playing like Blatz. I didn't really get any of that. But when I come back, AFI had just kind of, I think, moved to the Bay Area from Ukiah, and like they're all kind of converging there. And they start playing. They're kind of rising up in the ranks. Screw 32 is starting to become like everybody's band that they really enjoy and love. I think Filth was still playing a little bit then, and then yeah, but it was kind of, you could see this sort of like AFI, Screw 32 kind of thing happening, where they were kind of two bands that I remember. I was roadieing for Screw 32 right out of the gate when I got back, because I was living with Andrew at his house on his couch. I think I remember there's a story from a long time ago that you talked to Dave about.
I think Davey wrote about it too, actually, on his blog not too long ago, right? I think
he did. Yeah. But it's the funniest story. I was just telling him like a couple days ago. I was like, I remember you were talking to Damian about when you first met me and you saw me on the couch. I said it was the fucking funniest thing to hear you tell that story to somebody when I'm not present, because the way he tells it is so hilarious. He's like, and he had a wife, and he was in a straight edge band, and then he was smoking, and like, and he was in the Marines. He was a man, and I was just this like boy or something like that. It was so funny to hear that story. But but yeah, so I lived in that house and watched kind of, like Spit Boy was playing at that time, like the whole like Riot Girl thing was going on, kind of the third wave of feminism was playing out in music, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it was Spit Boy, Rancid had just blown up right before 94, I think maybe the year before. So they were really kind of taking it on, no longer playing Gilman Street. AFI was coming up, Screw 32 was really happening. Trying to think who else was
Swinging
playing.
Irish probably too.
Yes. You can't forget them because they were like the best band around at the time who was not like on MTV or something.
Yeah.
They were amazing.
Yeah. I think they're one of those bands that anyone who comes on the show that kind of saw them in that Streets of San Francisco era
Man.
says that they were one of the best bands. I've saw them in that, and I fully back that. I think they're one of the greatest bands of all time.
You could make that argument. They're really that good. They're really that solid. Yeah.
Ken Casey, to the point of vitriol towards Fat Records for the way everything went for them after. I love the records on Fat Records too, but he was saying that was, to him, like the great sin of Fat Records was what happened to.
I don't even know what happened. What happened?
I don't think. I just think the records got produced a little differently.
Okay, yeah, because there was like the first 3 records that they put out are the ones I listened to. Yeah, those are the ones that I was around for. Those are the ones I listened to. Beyond that, I didn't. I don't. Maybe that's the record you're talking about. But there was like, is it the one with like the bullets on the front? They look like fingers.
That was the second record on Fat Records. The first one was Juvenile Product of the Working Class.
I love that record.
I love that record too so much.
Yeah.
But I think like the production on Streets of San Francisco, which is Lars, I think, is perfect and
so good.
And I think people don't like that kind of like 90s Epiphat style production that kind of is on the second record as much, but I think the songs are there. I love that second record too. There's definitely some people though that get a little heated talking about it.
Yeah, I didn't see any problems with that record, and I typically don't like that sound of like I've never really been a big fan of like the Fat Record sound, or there's just a lot of that style of music that just never appealed to me, and that kind of sound was a little bit too produced, too slick. I think I was looking for the more raw and grittier stuff, but sometimes, like you said, the songs are there.
Yeah.
Right. And you can kind of just, it's a little slick, but the songs are there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Like I think that's like one of the things that's like, I guess that's the audio version of what's actually kind of playing out at that time in these scenes where you do have now there's like real possibility of success, or at least there's like a proof of success that's out there, and bands were willingly and unwillingly kind of following in those footsteps after Green Day explosion, I guess.
Yeah, it was all over the place, and I think a lot of people, nobody's going to tell you in that scene that that's what they wanted, but a lot of people, I think, really were gunning for that and looking for that. There's definitely the rootsy bands and the rootsy people, and my thing is like that wasn't ever really a place that I felt punk really should be, is in the mainstream. Like it felt weird and kind of like off to me, but Rancid did a great job with it. Green Day did a great job with it and still do, right? They're still all playing and they're still doing a great job with it. And, like AFI goes into that direction where they're just doing this amazing music in more of a sort of, I don't know, like I wouldn't say it's quite the mainstream at that point, but like it starts to get there. And for some people, it goes way mainstream. But then you have this larger spectrum where punk is playing out or hardcore is playing out. It's even happening on the East Coast, right? You see like Caroline Records trying to pick up all these bands on the East Coast. And when you're doing that, I think the bottom line that I always felt, because I was in this time where all my friends were being called sellouts, right? And I don't think that was accurate, because I think some of these people, they're doing what they love. They're doing it from their heart. They're playing exactly what they're playing. They're now doing it to a larger audience. And, you know, if you go into a place where there's more money involved, right, and maybe you're getting back a little bit more, you're getting new equipment or something like that, like, if your heart is not changing, if your passion for what you're doing is not changing, and all that stuff is still truly you, and you're genuine, you're authentic to what you're doing, I still think the message is there. I still think a lot of that stuff can be there. You know, some people, their version of, say, punk rock is to not ever cross a line, to go anywhere near the corporations, right? And so, you know, that's their definition.
Yeah, like it didn't really hit me till a couple years ago. I went and saw Green Day when they played here, and
Mm-hmm.
you realize like, oh, they gave all their friends jobs for life.
Yeah.
Like to be in the position where you can just kind of, you know, and AFI and Rancid also were in this position to kind of do this too, where like
Mm-hmm.
they went around and they got all their friends jobs and took them around the world with them. And obviously this is jobs, they're working, but at the same time, like how awesome is that you could just like be like, hey, we can all have careers now because of this thing and do this thing. And I think for me, from the outside, like it looked like Green Day and then Rancid was next.
Mm-hmm.
And then Rancid, then AFI was next. I saw AFI open for Rancid on that tour in Toronto. So I was associated with that kind of thing. And then I went to Gilman 99. And it
Mm-hmm.
really felt like Nerve Agents were the band that was going to be the one after AFI.
No way in hell.
From the outside, at least.
Thanks. I appreciate that. It's funny that you say that, because we used to talk about, because Atlantic Records was trying to sign us at one point, and I was like, no, this is not what we're doing, right? Like we're like capping out right here. This is what we're doing. And I said, who the hell in the mainstream wants to hear my voice? Nobody. You know what I mean? Like there was no way that was going to happen. And I had a hard time always playing on bigger stages, because it wasn't this intimacy. That I was doing it purely because my heart is in it for what I do, for what I'm like writing about, all these kinds of things. But it's also, if I'm in a band that's playing live, I'm doing it for that connection. I'm not doing it to see massive audience and that kind of thing. I'm doing it to connect with people. So, and there's nothing wrong with doing it for massive audience or anything like that, if that's your thing. But that was not my thing, especially in the Nerve Agents. That was very much not, very much not it. We talked about that too. I'm like, nobody wants to hear my voice.
I remember being at the Gilman, and I can't remember who I was standing beside, but they had a photo exhibit going on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm by myself, you know. I'm like because my friend was going to university there, so I could sleep on his dorm room floor, and my mom was a flight attendant, so I could fly for free. So it was perfect.
Oh, that's so cool.
It was awesome. And so I would go to the Gilman, and so I went there, and I'm looking at this photo exhibit, and I see a photo of you singing, and then the guy beside me is playing with you on stage, and I'm like, oh my god, are you in Redemption 87? He's like, no, I'm in the fucking Nerve Agents. Like, and I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's super funny. So who was it? Was that
I
Tim?
don't remember. I wish I could remember. I was pretty embarrassed at that point, so I made a hasty retreat to punish Max Ward more at his table.
My god, that's hilarious. It must have been Tim, I would imagine. If there's a photo, I'm thinking of one photo that keeps making its way to weird places, like it's in the window of Rasputin's on Telegraph Avenue, and I think that same photo was up at Gilman Street at one point.
That might make sense then. That would probably.
Do I have like no hair?
I'm trying to remember. Like it was honestly like one of the most mortifying moments of my entire life. I'm like, how could I not have thought it was in the Nerve Agents? That's so fucking ridiculous. So I was a huge Redemption 87 fan though, so I was pretty stoked.
Okay. No, that's awesome. Yeah, I looked in that picture that I'm talking about. I looked like I was in Redemption
Oh
87
no,
because I
you
had
had
no
no hair.
hair.
You had no hair. No, sorry. That I
Yeah,
thought you meant did he have no hair? No, you definitely had
yeah.
no hair. I knew you immediately. I'm like,
Okay.
oh, that's Eric from Redemption 87. Hence my assumption. Which
Oh, that's too funny. Yeah, it's yeah, the first Nerve Agent record may have had that same photo on it too. And that, the first Nerve Agent record was very much almost like an extension of Redemption 87 to some degree, you know, like it was very, very hardcore. They could have been Redemption songs, I think, you know.
so way back when you were talking about quitting Unit Pride, you mentioned having a flair for the dramatic when it comes to being a lead singer in a band, and I can very much relate that to that. I feel
Yeah.
very seen saying that because I have quit fucked up many times over the years before tours at very inopportune times. So,
Yeah.
um, when you quit at that point, was your plan to kind of walk away from music, or was it you would start another band, or
Um, I would say it was not to start another band because at that time you quit the band. There's no, you're not thinking there's a future in doing any of it. It's not like, oh, I should get into another band and keep on going. It's more of like, this is my high school band. It's the only one I've got. You know what I mean?
yeah?
Nobody else is going to pick me up. This is the band I'm in, right? It wasn't like a thriving scene in the valley where I come from, even though Gilman Street exists. Maybe if I was in Berkeley and kind of living there, I'd be like, oh, I'm going to join this band over here or something. But it was just so thin, right? And I guess we just weren't really thinking there's like some sort of future to be had by doing other bands. Um, so I quit the last time because I was just done. I was feeling like a lot of the people that I was around, the straight edge thing was happening and it was feeling very kind of oppressive and sort of off. It felt like there was like a lot of judgment about other people. And when you're in that sort of scene, you're kind of looking out at everybody else, making fun of people. Like it's just for fun, right? It's not really real. But then just started to feel a little too gross, I guess. And I'm still friends with all these people except for Corey Sabatini. But 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 that's just kind of how I felt at the time. And that's just me being dramatic too. As a young kid, like I just had that kind of flavor, right? Like I was very dramatic about a lot of things. And so I ended up walking away from that. And when I did that, um, so that was the same year that my graduating class was happening, but I didn't graduate. But my friends and I, who had come up with all the years before through elementary school and through high school, we're all like, we're going to college. I'm like, yeah, we're going to college. I hadn't even finished my sophomore year at that point in high school. And so I'm thinking like, I'm going to go to college and kind of do something. And by the time the fall rolls around and, and I'm sitting there and I'm like in my second week of college classes that I got in, I'm like, I can't do this. What the hell am I doing? I didn't even graduate from high school. Oh shit, I got to go back to high school. so, so I literally took the bus from the college back into my hometown and walked into my high school and said, I need you to take me back for one more year so I can finish my 2 years in 1 year. And they're like, there's no way in hell you're going to ever do that. I said, please let me try. And so I did. And I did it. And so, that was really important to me. And I realized that I'd screwed up so bad that I really wanted to get back and do that. And so it's actually one of the highlights of my life is that I returned to high school and did 2 years in one and got a diploma and was able to walk and feel good about myself. But at that point, like I had just not seen any other kind of future at all. And I was growing up in a house that was pretty abusive There was a lot of physical violence and things like that. A lot of manipulation by my stepdad and that kind of stuff. So I was always out. I was always jumping out the window, being out all night. Like I had like a horrendous teenage years growing up in that house where I was like the terror of the town. I lived in a small town, and like the cops were always questioning me, like, where were you last night? And I would always be like, I was at home, but I wasn't. I was out, and it was probably me that did what they were looking for. Right. So it was one of those kinds of things. But um, when I went back, I was like, I don't want to be here. This is just no good, right? But I didn't have any discipline. I didn't really know how to really kind of stabilize myself on my own. And of course, I was very dramatic, like I said, and the Desert Storm was happening. And so I'm like watching the bombs drop on Baghdad, and I was like, I should join the Marine Corps. And believe me, it made no sense. It was the most impulsive thing that I've done. And I even backed out of joining because I was like, what am I doing? But, and this is classic me as a teen, I had a girlfriend at the time. And after I had originally joined the Marine Corps, signed up, I backed out and said, I'm not joining. I don't want to be part of the Marine Corps. That's not me. And she said, if you don't go back in there, I'm going to break up with you. I was like, oh shit. So I went back and signed back up. I got a shorter contract out of the deal, but but it was good. It was good because ultimately I was like, this gets me out of here. Right. There was no other way out in my mind because I couldn't hold down a job. I was really not disciplined at all. I quit every job I got, and just really not well suited to take on life. And so it was really the way out to make college money and that kind of thing. And so when I went in, it was not for me. And I quickly figured that out within, I think, the first year. I was in the Philippines on a deployment, and somebody from one of the towns in the Bay Area, from Benicia, had Operation Ivy tape on him. And I was like, oh, crazy. I know that band. Like, we used to play with them. He's like, oh, that's so weird. I said, can I borrow that tape? Because I didn't have any music with me while I was there. And I put that thing on and played it over and over again. And it like rebooted like my head. It like brought me back to like who I was, in a sense, just listening to Jesse's lyrics and just really kind of reorienting to that. I didn't, I was still stuck in the Marine Corps, but now I was sort of oriented back into why I was doing Unit Pride in the first place, why I was doing like punk rock in the first place. And that was really important. That's why I ended up with the tattoo of the Operation Ivy logo on my leg. So just to remind me.
When Dennis Tech from Radio Birdman was on the show,
Mm-hmm.
he talked about waking up one day and joining the Air Force. Or no,
Mm-hmm.
I think he joins the Navy and becomes
Yeah.
a pilot for the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that transition fascinating because I can't think of a less disciplined world than being in a band.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can't think of a more disciplined world from a distance than being in the military. Was that something you had any experience with, like Cub Scouts or any of that kind of stuff? Like, were you prepared at all for what was?
I was in the Cub Scouts, but I wasn't disciplined when I was in the Cub Scouts.
Yeah, I don't think Cub Scouts is the same thing. That's the closest I've been. So
Yeah. No, no, what I think, looking back on it and just kind of thinking about like child development and stuff like that, is that you just kind of in this place. You don't see the consequences of your choices, the long range consequences. My brain is not developed as a 18-year-old or 19 when I joined. And so I'm not thinking about the consequences of things. I'm impulsively just acting. And like I said, I had a flair for the dramatic. So that really kind of means I'm a little bit more impulsive, maybe. And so, that's true. That's true of me. And so when I look at like, I'm in this band, I wasn't supposed to sing, but like I just impulsively said yes to singing. And I was scared to death of being in front of people. And yet I did it because Tim said, you won't be in the band otherwise. I was like, all right, I'm singing, because I was going to play bass. And he's like, you don't have a bass and you don't know how to play bass. I was like, okay. Anyway, so like those kinds of choices are just made, and some of them work out and some of them don't. And I think for me, going into this like sort of chaos is my comfort zone based on how I grew up. Like, my dad was like driving down the freeway and claiming we had no brakes and hide under the blankets in the back, and my sister and I are screaming. It's like that kind of like life growing up and having a physically abusive stepdad, and like all these kinds of like unpredictabilities in your life. The band world made sense to me. That was easy, right? The idea of going into this greatly dramatic choice of joining the Marine Corps during Desert Storm and like suddenly moving away is chaos. And I don't know what I'm getting into, right? I've seen Full Metal Jacket. That's scary. I've seen Stripes with Bill Murray. That's kind of fun. I've seen, Private Benjamin with Goldie Hawn, and that's so like all these things are kind of speaking to me in that way as a 19-year-old who's just really impulsive and can't really foresee the consequences playing out. But what it does is it sounds like the better choice than staying in the place that I'm stuck in. Mm-hmm. Living in the unpredictability around all the abuse and stuff like that. So that's why I joined. And it's not who I am. I don't go in and get brainwashed. I end up kind of rebooting back to the punk world, right? But it did play out to bring me a lot of benefits in my life.
Had that year that you're trying to finish high school, had been forced to distance yourself from the punk scene a little bit?
Yeah, well, I had to, because one thing I did know about myself is that I couldn't do school and go back to it without being distracted by all my friends, because they were all using drugs, they were skateboarding, some of them were straight edge and playing music. Like all these people are just doing stuff that doesn't equate to like focusing on school. So I was like, look, guys, I got to go and do this high school thing, and I can't really hang out much anymore, and I have to stay focused, because I had to do 2 years in one. Like I was doing homework all night long. I would wake up in the morning, go in early, do school. At the end of the day, I would stay late, and then I would come home and I would just do homework, and I would listen to records while I was doing homework. But that's all I did. It was a lonely time, I'll tell you that.
Did you run into anyone? Did you get anyone's sense of their reaction when you did join the Marines? Because it is such a political scene, like we're talking about here. It's not like, I don't know, I think New York or DC, they're political, but I think even then there's like it's not quite as political as the Bay is to me.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if I was running around with a Marine Corps flag or something, or wearing a uniform into Gilman Street, maybe. but I didn't do any of that. Yeah. So like when I came back into some of my friends from that scene, they were welcoming. Tim Armstrong had a ton of questions for me, like, what's it like? He's asked me all these things. And when I came back, right after I joined, I came home, we all went out to dinner and in my hometown, and Tim and Brett and Grant were all just asking me questions, and they found it fascinating. I think there are a lot of people probably who didn't say a lot to me about like how screwed up they probably thought it was that I joined. But while I was in the military, what I learned, and there's also a Maximum Rock and Roll issue out there about punks in the military. And I encountered so many in there with similar stories to mine. It was a way to get out. It was a way to escape. Some people were just there for college money, but a lot of people were escaping their lives that they felt like they couldn't really exist in. And so I think it's, in some ways, it's, politically, it's not like what you do as like a political punk rockers like go join the government military and, head off to hopefully not, but head off to war because it's kind of what you're training to do. My take on it was always like, we're not getting into any wars. We just had one, because the bombs dropped and then it shut down and it was over. And by the time I actually stepped into the bus to go to boot camp, it was done. It'd already been like 3 months done, I think. And so I was like, there's no way that we're going to get into another one. There's no pattern there to suggest that. And so I was like, okay, I'm good. I'm just going to go and get this done with and come back, and then I'll be in a better place. Right. So, yeah.
Well, the guy you meet in the Philippines, you guys form, I think you call it fan club, right? I think it says in this book.
Oh yeah. You read it in the book, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. I think you guys formed fan club, right? That's what you're, and you guys were like, listen to punk stuff.
Yeah. So the guy that gave me the tape was not part of that. And it was not in the Philippines. It was in Okinawa, Japan.
Okay.
Yeah. So Okinawa, Japan, we had this, one of the guys that I hung out with, he was part of like this admin part of the Marine Corps. So he and this one other guy were sleeping on one half of this like Quonset hut. And so if you walk through, there's a middle where there's bathrooms and stuff. And beyond that, there's a whole, like a mirror image other side of the Quonset hut. But that one was shut down. And in it was this massive pile of fans, like fans for, to cool off, that kind of thing. Yeah. Just these huge fans. And they were all in this gigantic pile. And so we would go in there, and I'd become vegan in Okinawa, right? And so, because I've been reading like Animal Liberation and Diet for New America. And so I had all this vegan food shipped over from the States, like this massive box of like dried vegan foods that you could chef up in different ways. And so I get it sent to me, and we go in, we buy a hot plate from the PX, and we go into this part of the Quonset hut where nobody's at. And all we got to do is keep an eye out for like the officer of the day or whatever they're called. I can't remember the name of them, but they would go on patrol and do a walkthrough like every couple hours or so. So we would have to watch for that person because we were illegally cooking vegan food in this Quonset hut, making like spaghetti, like literally just spaghetti and tomato sauce, and then like burritos with like refried beans and I think like salsa. It was really gross. But we were all like trying to take on this whole vegan thing because I got them all to read these books. So we were all like hanging out, trying to eat this vegan food, but we were listening to like Rancid and Gorilla Biscuits and like all these like punk bands. I think Fugazi's first album had come out. And so here we were like in there, and we were like moshing and just thrashing the place. And we would take these fans and just huck them at each other and like throw them as hard as we could. And people would be dodging it, trying not to get hit. And so because all those fans were in there, we were always throwing them at each other. We called ourselves the fan club. So it was super, super fun.
Were you able to go and see any shows or during this time period?
I went to one show. Actually, that's not true. I went to one show in Hawaii where I was stationed, and I don't know who the band was, but it was actually like a youth crew hardcore band in Hawaii.
Oh,
I don't know. There's two people that I know that live here near me who I just ran into not long ago, and they mentioned the name of the band, and I can't remember what it was. Sorry. But the funny thing was I went to see them, and they were excited that I was there because they knew Unit Pride. And I was like, what? How did these people know Unit Pride? You're in Hawaii, right? Like, because at the time, like to me, Unit Pride was only known by like a select few people in New York City and the Bay Area. That's it. Maybe some people in SoCal. But like Hawaii, like I didn't even know there was like a punk scene over there, a hardcore scene. So they're playing the show. They invite me to the show, and they said, we're going to do a Unit Pride song and you're going to sing. And I was like, okay. And I've got like some of my Marine Corps friends with me. But the funny thing is that the show got shut down because somebody grabbed onto the ceiling and ripped it down. The whole thing got shut down. I was like, ah, damn, because I was going to get to sing again. Yeah.
And then you get back to Berkeley, and how long after you get back does Redemption 87 come together?
I come back like spring of '94. It was like April. I got out and I came back, and I literally within 2 weeks I'm living on that couch in the punk house, in the Adeline house, and I've just started to kind of meet people again. Some people are new, like Lars Fredrickson, and we started hanging out, and like, all these people in the house were like, Scott from Dance Hall Crashers, Sarah Tascioni from like Thrasher magazines living there, Andrew Attai is living there, Tim Armstrong, Brett Reeder upstairs. Like, it was just this crazy time where everything's sort of crushing in. But Lars, so I started a band in late '94 called Pottersfield.
I was going to ask you about Pottersfield.
Yeah. And we did 3 shows in total. The first show, this is hilarious. The first show that I ever play after Unit Pride, the first song, I jump and break my leg. But I was like, I'm going to go off, like, and I like literally jump and break my leg. And so I spent the rest of the show playing the entire show with a broken leg. I was just crouched in pain, just screaming into the microphone. And people are like, man, that was intense. And I was like, I think my leg hurt. I think I did something to my leg. It's broken or something. And they had to carry me off the stage. It's hilarious.
What did Pottersfield sound like?
I don't know what we sounded like. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I was coming off of like the whole, like, I love Nirvana phase. Like, I really loved Nirvana, especially like their really weird stuff. And so I just really kind of was, I think, angling my voice in kind of that drawn out sort of way. Not like I sing in everything else, but more like that. Maybe almost copying Kurt Cobain in some ways. So it probably sounds a lot like that. But the music, so the people I played with was Doug Sangalang from Screw 32, Davey C, who's been in a number of bands, and I can't even name one now that I'm thinking about it. But he's been part of that whole Gilman Street scene since the late 80s, maybe even earlier 80s. But he played drums, and then a couple other guys from, Dave and I always talk about how we can't remember the band name.
Did they put out records or?
No. I can't remember the name of the bands that they're from. Jason and Dylan are these 2 guys, but we played, and I think it was more kind of maybe like Rocket from the Crypt, sort of Drive Like Jehu kind of stuff. So it wasn't like hardcore. It wasn't any kind of like pop punk or anything like that. It wasn't anything that would be classically what we would be playing.
It's like kind of like San Diego sound, like even with the vocals,
maybe
a little San Diego vibe.
It's hard to describe what Pottersfield sounded like. I have no, and that's why I can't even remember. I'm like, I don't even know what he sounded like. Nobody ever talked about like, you sound like this. So like, I really don't know what it sounded like.
And how many, did you guys just play a handful of shows you were saying?
We played 3 shows. We did get a recording once of some live stuff, but it was really bad recording. And then that was lost. I don't know who even had that, but it was all really quick. It's like in a matter of like 3 or 4 months or something like that.
And then how long after does that Redemption 87 start going?
Yeah. So after Pottersfield, I think is when I moved. I moved away for about 2 weeks up north with my wife at the time. And then we hated that. And so we came back. And I really wanted to come back in time to see Rancid play. So we're like, we need to move because Rancid's playing tomorrow. So we packed up the whole house and moved back. Yeah, which is a terrible story. Andrew Attai from Screw 32 helped me move. And when he did, so I was not the smartest person in the, if you had a whole group of people, I'm not the smartest one in that group. And so when we were coming back, it was in the middle of the summer and it was super hot and there was no air conditioning in the car, right? And so we had the windows down, but we couldn't crack them all the way down because we had a cat in the car. And so we've got my cat, Mr. Wonderful, in the back of the car, like dying. Like, this is a long-haired cat. We're, 24, 25 years old. And just like, well, the cat will survive. It'll be fine. So we're driving and cat is back there just like, just really like panting heavy. And I was like, man, we're like in the middle of the mountains, right? Coming down through Northern California. We're like in the middle of the mountains. And we're like, we gotta get this cat out. I'm afraid it's going to like die, right? Like, and of course, I love animals. And so I'm trying to take care of the animal. But in my mind, what I'm about to do is right. Now, at this point in time, I think it's a really stupid idea. But at the time, it seemed right because it was the only place that we could go to cool off the cat. So we take the cat out of the car, carry it down the side of the freeway, off or down the side of the hill, walk down across all of the rocks to the river, and toss the cat in the river so that it's soaked and cooled off. And the cat is like in it's not like out in the middle of the river where it's going to float away or anything. We just kind of toss it into the water and it gets soaked. And then it walks out. It's like completely drenched. And it walks past us. And I could swear this cat like had this face of like, I'm going to fucking kill you both. And it goes walking past us and we're like watching it walk by. And we're like, oh no, that's a mad cat. Like, and the cat walks and we watch it walk up underneath a tree and it just sits there. And we're like, well, it's cooled off. So hopefully that's helpful. We both felt bad that was the only thing we could think of doing. We just didn't know what to do. We thought it was going to die, right? So then we go to get the cat. And as we turned around to go get the cat, it's not there. And we're like, oh shit. So we spend an hour on the side of this incline, like looking for the cat in the bushes, under the trees. We can't find it anywhere. And all I can think of is like, oh my God, I'm going to kill the cat. Like this is the first time I should be thinking that, right? Like this is actually probably the third time I should be thinking that. And so I'm sitting there going, it's going to get eaten by a mountain lion out here. Cause we were like way out in the mountains. And to finally like an hour later, the cat comes walking up. And so I grab it and put it in the car and take it and it was fine. So when we got back to the Bay Area, we went straight to Gilman Street, which Andrew had keys to because he was booking shows there at the time. And we went in and we brought the cat inside. The cat goes and rests inside of Gilman Street. And then we lose the cat in Gilman Street. And we can't find the cat in Gilman Street. And so we're there for forever looking for this cat. And finally we find the cat again. But anyway, that's the story of Mr. Wonderful and how Mr. Wonderful made it to the Bay Area.
That's incredible. Did you guys see the Rancid show in the end?
We did. Hey! We did see it. Yeah. So anyway, that was our whole crazy move back. But yeah, so when I got back, like I was like, I really want to start a band. And so I was talking to Lars and we were hanging out a lot and he was living over at Punks with Presses and we were living we were living on like 54th and San Pablo in Oakland. And it was just like this really run down part of Oakland. And so we had we had a bunch of people living in that house, and Lars would come over a lot. And one day he brings Timmy Chunks from Token Entry, who's also Green Day's roadie at the time. And so we're all sitting around talking, and I meet Timmy for the first time, which is super cool because I'd seen him play at the Right Track Inn on Long Island when I was out there for those 2 weeks in 1987, which is super cool. And so I'm stoked that I'm like meeting Timmy, and I don't know if it was at that point or if it was the next time we met up, but Lars suggested I ask Timmy to start a band because he knew that I wanted to start a hardcore band. And so I said, well, he lives in Los Angeles and he's like always gone with Green Day. And he's like, so what? Just see if you can start the band. And so I was like, okay. So I asked Timmy, and Timmy's like, well, I'm roadieing for Green Day and I'll be gone sometime. And so we're like, okay, sure, let's do it. So I talked then to another friend who I just met, who Lars introduced me to, which was Ian Miller, who's the bass player for Skank and Pickle at the time. And so he's in, and then and this is kind of funny. Gary, who is with me in Birdlegs right now, who was also in Said Radio, who was also in Redemption 87, I met him through my wife, who, when I was living with my wife out of the Marine Corps before we moved up to where Mr. Wonderful's from in Arcata, we lived in my wife's mom's house. And so while we were there, she was dating this guy, and it's Gary.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so Gary's dating my wife's mom, and he also playing in this band called Corduroy, which was like an indie band from San Francisco. And at the time, they were like the darlings of the indie scene in San Francisco. And they were amazing, that band. They were so
records,
good.
Right? Corduroy?
They did. The one they put out is just not as good, though, as like some of their stuff. There's like some 7 inches and things like that out there, but it's really good. Again, it's kind of, to me, it always reminded me a little bit of like, the music reminded me a little bit of like Nirvana. The vocals did not, but I really loved it nonetheless and was a big fan of that. And so I'd go see him play, and that's how I knew he played drums. And I didn't, I just like, I'm putting a band together, right? Like, I've got a guy who plays hardcore and another guy, Ian, who was a Unit Pride fan in New Orleans when he was young, who could play great bass. He was a great bass player. And suddenly I just know a drummer, and it didn't matter that he didn't know how to do like break down the walls on drums or anything like that. He played drums. So I got him, and he was totally down. And of course, Gary and I now have this like forever relationship. But that's how we put Redemption 87 together. And and then we got Scotty later on, who was second guitar. And then eventually Scotty leaves the band, and then Jade comes in. So
it felt like, I guess I got the record maybe a year after it came out. I was trying to think when I got like the record in terms of when it actually came out. Because it finally showed up in a record store, but we knew about it because it felt like at that time there weren't a lot of fast hardcore bands. Like there weren't a lot of bands doing traditional hardcore.
Right. Yeah. And that's really what Redemption 87 was about. Right. And it was built into the name, which Lars came up with because he knew that we were trying to hearken back to the old days of hardcore when it was fast and aggressive and not so metallic. And, that's what we were doing. And so we just pretty much wore it on our sleeve that we were trying to kind of bring it back to 1987, which to me was the heyday for like that kind of hardcore that I grew up with, that I really loved. That specific kind of brand, right? New York hardcore.
It's interesting because normally people rally around 88 as being that year.
Yeah.
Right. 87 is kind of like, I guess, I don't know, there's more of an excitement in 87 than 88, I guess, around that.
You know what it is? To me, at least, it's the New York City 1987 Together compilation. That 7-inch is my all-time favorite record. Like that is the one. That is the grittiest, rawest, like recordings. And when you listen to it, it's kind of like, for me, listening to that on a really junky record player in my bedroom back in 1987 when it came out, and even 88, I was still listening to it. Like, I felt like I was in those songs. I was in that room. I was in that venue. Like, it just felt like you were there. And so, like, part of that, like going to New York City, it was prepped by that record. And so when I was listening to that, that was what I was imagining that I was going to. And in some ways, it kind of, the two merged together for me. So it's a really, really rich experience, that one record for me.
And if Unit Pride was out of step with Berkeley in 87, what was it like for Redemption 87? Like the few years later in the 90s, where it definitely feels
we were out of step.
Yeah, it feels like an even bleaker time for that style of music.
It really was. Like, I remember it being, so the cool thing about coming from the Bay Area as a band, people are kind of more accepting, I think, just in general in the punk scene, than like if you're trying to do a hardcore band off brand in the hardcore scene at a certain time. And so for me, like in Redemption 87, Strife, Snapcase, Earth Crisis, 1134, like all these bands are playing a certain kind of style, right? That's very different than like Youth of Today or Unit Pride. And so to come back and do that, there was a lot of people that were very, very excited about it. There was a lot of people excited about it. We sounded different than like a typical like youth crew band. So we weren't just doing that. We had like Ian was in Skank and Pickle, right? And, and Timmy was not like a youth crew guy, Timmy Chunks, right? And Gary was not that drummer from the youth crew scene, but that's what we were all focused on sort of playing towards. But it had kind of an offness to it. And I think that really spoke to the larger sort of, punk person who like listens to us. And so that's what I feel like we were just kind of like off. And because the hardcore was not really doing that at the time, we were off with the hardcore scene. But all these people that really loved that youth crew stuff and loved that like sort of old school hardcore really liked Redemption 87, I think. Yeah. So, but it felt weird because people in the hardcore scene were really not into us right away.
And even a few years later, when that youth crew revival thing really kicks off on the East Coast, like aesthetically, it feels so different than Redemption 87. Even like a lot more of it was like calling back the collegiate letter font or.
Yeah, we weren't doing that.
Yeah, like at Redemption 87, it felt like that was just like it wasn't a bringing it back band so much as it was just a band doing the style.
Yeah. I think, if you go back to Unit Pride, you kind of look at that first 7-inch and, it's not the collegiate block letters either. It's Jesse Michael's artwork. And it's like this kind of like, if you look at Redemption 87, Unit Pride, the Nerve Agents, like I did the lettering with whiteout and a Sharpie for like all three of those bands.
Yeah.
and that sensibility comes just from being a punk in Berkeley. And that has always stuck with me. So I think in some ways we weren't doing the youth crew stuff we wanted to do correctly.
Yeah, because it's too punk.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't have that like hardcore detachment that
right.
That I don't know, like I think it, and that's what I also kind of loved about it, is the fact that it didn't feel like it was trying to necessarily be an East Coast band. Like, and I don't think Breakaway maybe even they decided to do this, but I think the Breakaway aesthetic on those 7-inches really kind of mimics the East Coast approach. There's a lot more collegiate font. Like I think my Breakaway 7-inch even has like a Judge ripoff cover.
Oh yeah.
But whereas Unit Pride had like like you're saying, like it's a very unique punk rock Bay Area kind of aesthetic to it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the band as a whole, I really wanted to be like Ray Cappo at 16 years old. That's just, I was just a young kid wanting to be like the guy that I idolized, right? But if you kind of go before that, like I was just a punk kid who suddenly saw Youth of Today and like really wanted to like put that costume on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Tim was always, I think, a hardcore guy. I think in Tim's heart, he's very punk rock, but sensibility wise, he's always the hardcore guy. He's like stable. He's got his shit together.
He plays hockey.
Yeah, exactly. All comes naturally. All the sports clothes, right? Yeah. So, but Grant and Peter, they're very much punks. These are not like your youth crew type of, even when they were wearing the Youth of Today's shirts and wearing the shorts and stuff like that, they didn't look like those guys. You know what I mean? Because it's like when you're all in, you kind of look like you all look the same, right? And that's what I was after. I wanted to look like them, right? I wanted to be like them because I was a young kid wanting that. But these guys, like they couldn't do it. And so I think that's kind of one of the things we're speaking to is that we were just off, right? We're just always off.
Yeah, I come from Canada where everything we do is just kind of off a little bit compared to America. It seems a little slower, but it's just because I think it's out of rhythm, and I think that is reflected in like a lot of our like the youth crew bands, especially the first wave of stuff, how silly these bands were and how self-aware a lot of the stuff that they were doing was. And it was kind of like the same sort of thing where I love that Youth of Today tour where they go around that first time, and even that second 87 tour, it's like this too, where they're just spreading the seed, and wherever the seed's going to land, it's not going to grow the same way it did back in Connecticut or in New York. It's going to grow differently, right? And that's why I love Brotherhood and Confront and you guys, because it's sort of this like local representation of the same sort of energy that was also happening on the East Coast.
Yeah. I think that's really well said. Having that kind of planting of the seed, the soil is different wherever you go, right? Like, but they're infusing that kind of like energy, like that passion. And, a lot of people picked up on that, and they're coming from very different backgrounds. If the Bay Area scene is so much different than the New York scene or the Toronto scene, right? Or the San Diego or Huntington Beach scenes, right? Mm-hmm. Like they all just have so much different background going on to like, Chain of Strength was not Unit Pride, right?
Yeah.
And uniform choice. It's like it's being infused probably by Minor Threat than it is Youth of Today or anything like that, because I don't think Youth of Today came into their equation. But like you take their background and they don't sound like Minor Threat. They sound more like something from Southern California.
Yeah, like I find Southern California especially, there's like there's a level of optimism to the punk and hardcore, and there's sort of like a loving accepted, like it, and this is once again from an outsider perspective, but like it feels like Southern California bands, I feel like there's like a rising tide will raise all ships mentality sometimes, like at least amongst my friends there. Whereas on the East Coast, I find, including Toronto, there's like a deep bitterness where if your friends are doing something, you're like, fuck those motherfuckers, like they're fucking sellouts. And it's just like this, like, maybe it's the cold that makes people more bitter. And I don't know, I imagine it's different in the Bay than either of these places.
I have to wonder though, this is really kind of going out there, but you think about like the East Coast, there's so much roots. There's so much root planted in just by people that live there. Families, generation upon generation, architecture, all this kind of stuff. Like to me, there's always been kind of this like, when people stay where they are, they kind of like develop a culture within the family, within the neighborhoods that's really rich and rooted. And, like you become very strongly a community, right? Whereas like, I think the generations of people who, went out on the frontier and moved west are more like this sort of free move and free spirit kind of open. Like you almost have to be optimistic to be doing something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Almost like foolishly. Right. And so like, part of me wonders if there isn't some of that just built into like the soil, right? That we talk about when we're talking about Youth Today, planting seeds in different soil. You get this Southern California optimistic flavor, and you get this sort of maybe a little bit of bitterness from like maybe the East Coast somewhere. Like maybe some of that's happening in this really, really deep way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
no, I totally see that too. Cause it's like, well, I guess the end of the line theory, right? Like everyone who winds up on the West Coast, it's like the wildest, freest spirits because that's as far as they could go.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is kind of like that though, right? It's like, think about people that come to like Hollywood or something like that. They had to break away from wherever they lived and, their families and things like that. It takes a certain kind of like mindset to kind of make yourself do that in the first place.
I find it interesting when you look at the reaction to Jawbreaker signing to the major label versus Green Day signing to the major label, where I find, and I've been given a lot of different reasons for this, so I'm intrigued to hear what your thoughts on it are, but like, I find the reception both bands got from the local scene very different post them signing to the major label. And people in Green Day have pushed back, or Billy Joe said no, like we got a lot of shit, but people fucking hated Jawbreaker when they signed to the major label.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, like I wasn't really around for the Jawbreaker experience, right? And really, I wasn't around for the Green Day experience. I only know what I heard, kind of like being somewhat of an outsider at the time, because that's a stretch where I'm not really there. But what I do know is from the people who were there and kind of how they thought about it. And I think anybody during that time got a lot of shit. I think Billy Joe is right in that, and he would know more than probably anybody other than his other bandmates. But when the stuff that they had to go through and the shit that they had to take from their scene, I mean, these people, this band was so beloved. And, like we were talking about earlier, some people have different definitions of where you cross the line, right? And so there's a lot of breaks that have to happen, right? Like just breaking from the scene in general and stepping out. And anytime that happens, I see that people really get bummed. AFI, Rancid, Green Day, Jawbreaker. Like you could be playing to 1,000 people in a different venue, and sometimes that happens because people are like, "Oh, you sell out. You're playing the Fillmore now, and you're not going to forever play Gilman Street or the Berkeley Square or something." Yeah. So there's always happening at different points, but I think ultimately Jawbreaker and Green Day really got a lot of flack for that because they were so beloved. They were such, and Rancid too. I mean, these are bands that come from really like deep rooted scenes that they were moving through Operation Ivy. And then you've got like that era of like when Rancid's still playing Gilman Street, so they are always taking all this flack constantly as they were sort of rising up. Nowadays, I don't think anybody really takes flack anymore, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
Yeah, like it's interesting how things have shifted so much, but like this was like live or die shit for some people back
Yeah.
then, and it seems quaint, but it's like it was like you were leaving a religion. Like it was
Hmm.
you were going to be ostracized from your community. And I was reading something today about the making of In Utero and just how deliberately, I guess Kurt Cobain at least was saying that he wanted to sabotage his career and make this record that was like the punk record. And like reading at the time, I was just like, oh yeah, like whatever. But then you think about it, you're like, oh yeah, this guy has been completely separated from community, thrown into this like new world.
Mm.
Like he probably fucking hated it. Like I could totally see not liking it, or just
Yeah.
not liking what it took to be there. At least,
Yeah. Well, I've actually heard that about In Utero in the past. I think I read it in a book or something that was kind of the intention with that record, but then they made him go back and like reproduce it or redo the record or
they
something like
remixed it,
that.
I think, right? Like
Yeah.
the not Butch Vig, or no, sorry, the not Steve Albini mix or something. I think.
Yeah. And then they were like not happy with that. So,
Yeah,
you know, but yeah, I mean, I could see just from what I understood of Kurt Cobain, like that makes sense, right? Like that would be something that he would want to do, at least kind of how I understood him to be. But then of course, you know, here he is like handcuffed by the thing that he's trying to blow up, right?
yeah.
And I mean, it's a terrible thing, but um, yeah, I mean, it's so challenging. Like when you say, you know, it's like leaving a religion, it is for some people that is their religion, right? It's like the church of punk rock, and for some people, it really is black and white. You know, you're either this way or you're not, right? And I mean, that's just people in general too. I think, you know, if you step out and kind of look at, you know, if I'm an Oakland A's fan, right, and the Oakland A's moved to Sacramento, right, and I stay with the team and follow them while they're in Sacramento, moving on to Las Vegas of all places, then I'm a sellout for sticking with the team after the team screwed the community of
Mm-hmm.
Oakland.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, and that's definitely something that as an A's fan has come up like in conversation, and people are so angry about it because some people are so invested, and it is the thing that they love the most. Because for some people, sports is like that.
Mm-hmm.
Sports is their religion. And for me, it's like I love sports and I've always been really into different kinds of sports and things like that. But baseball has always been my thing. And so it's not my religion though, right? It's not the thing I believe in and need to have happening at all points for me to kind of thrive in my life, right? But for some people, sports can be like that. So you can get these people who are like, you know, that's not how a fan should be. You know, this is our team. Like you should be hating, you know, this other team that's playing, you know, like, and it's kind of like that for some people. And, you know, and we see it happen actually in religion, right? Where people are very like, you know, if you're not doing it this way, you're wrong. You're going to go to hell, right?
Yeah, I guess there's sports teams like Celtic or St. Pauli, like these ones that have political ideology baked into the fandom. But I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what's different between punk and other things. Like punk is like an ideological, and not everyone is in lockstep in this ideology, but we all kind of like have the same sort of reference points, and it's like very close knit and small. Like the scenes that we're talking about, ultimately, like there's like 150 people at the cores of these things, right? And these
Mm-hmm.
punk scenes, and then like you were saying earlier, when you play these huge shows, it's not like, oh man, now there's exponentially more of these 150 people that I'm from. It's like, no, I've just found a way to attract people that I do not get along with, not even get along with, like I would not even want to be in the same room with necessarily.
Yeah.
And now they're into my band too. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what it is. And so you, like you're saying earlier, you lose that connection because you're not part of this punk scene anymore. You're now part of this other thing that's existing
Yeah.
around you. And yeah, that doesn't hold a lot of appeal to me either. like, I think with the name like Fucked Up and me sounding the way I sound, looking the way I do, I don't think Billy Joe Armstrong pressures were beating down on me in the same way. But
Yeah.
but you know, I did have to at some point, like, you know, like yourself, be like, yeah, I don't think it's going to work for us.
Yeah. I mean, we can kind of see it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we know.
Yeah. No, it's, you know, I think with that, I mean, it's so hard because I can only really speak ultimately to myself and how I feel about things. And, you know, as I've gotten older, I've kind of let go of the like clamp down on like the rigidity, right? In how I think about things. In 1994, I might be like, screw those metal hardcore bands. They're not doing it correctly, right? and now I'm like, I don't fucking care. They're actually awesome. I just don't really listen to you know, Strife or Vegan Reich or, you know, whatever. But I can recognize that they're amazing. And the people are, yeah, I've met most of those people and they're awesome. You know? So yeah.
Was Vegan Reich playing shows at the same time as Unit Pride would have been playing shows?
No, that would have been later. That would have been like Redemption
Yeah.
87 time.
I've never seen any footage of that band playing.
I don't know what they look like.
It's like a myth. You know, it's like one of those bands. Like
it is kind of like a myth. I just the name alone, like the name alone, is just its own thing.
Yeah,
Vegan Reich. Think about that.
It's insane. Dan Burt from Chumbawamba was on the podcast, and he was talking about the audacity of playing a show and seeing a guy wearing a Vegan Reich shirt at the show. And I unfortunately had to inform him that, well, you're actually on a comp with Vegan Reich put out by the lead singer of Vegan Reich.
I love that. That's great.
But that, I think, was almost like that had the most insane viral branding of anything in straight edge hardcore ever. Like the logo, the aesthetic, like everything about it was like, it's like came out of an advertising agency. They're like, all right, what do we got? We got to take this Rev thing to the next level, guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's bold. It's bold, you know. I think with you know, I think of another. I mean, Project X, right?
Mm-hmm.
When that came out, Project X is just a cool name, right? And then you go and look at their 7-inch, and it's like, of the time, it's got like this fist and like giant X, and like what they're singing about is just this boldness to it, and it just creates almost like a viral kind of deal, even though there's no viral back then. It's like it just blows up, and again, it's like parody stuff, but is it, you know, I mean, like, and then of course, like, people get involved and they think it's super fun and they're having a good time, and some people are taking it super seriously. Like, I mean, it's just this crazy thing, but it just explodes because it's got this sort of bold nature to it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I think it's especially with that hardline stuff, it's like they looked at the Project X thing, they're like, yeah, but what if we really did it? Like, and then a McDonald's being firebombed.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, it reminds me more like the Crucial Youth thing, right? It's like, I thought it was real.
Yeah.
You know? Well, and think about the kids that are going to get their hands on that. And I was one of them. Not that I thought it was real, but because I knew those guys at that time. So I kind of had a sense of like what it was. But think about the kids that don't.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And they're like, oh, man.
Well, it's funny. Jeff Tweedy was on the podcast and talked about the worst possible band. It makes Vegan Reich sound like, I don't know, Promise Ring by comparison. But he knew the guys in the band White Pride. And
Oh, okay.
White Pride wasn't a Nazi band. In fact, they were making fun of Nazis.
Mm,
Unfortunately, the further you get removed from the band and who they were and realizing, oh, they're Jewish members, there's Asian members in this band, you get to the point where you can't tell that, and you're just like, oh no, it just sounds and looks like a Nazi band. And eventually, sure enough, a Nazi record label bootlegged the White Pride recordings as Ernest, and that is the legacy of
wow.
this band. So he was like, yeah,
Amazing.
like it goes to show you that unfortunately that's the thing with punk rock, right? Like when you're in that little group of 150 people,
Hmm.
everyone knows what's a joke, everyone knows what isn't a joke, everyone knows the rules.
Yeah.
As soon as it gets outside of that group, God help us.
It's so it's so true. I mean, I always think about that, which is art in general, right? Like when you put something out there and you know that your thing is a parody, or you're just screwing around, or just wanted to, like, make a big sort of statement, and then people take it as like this, almost like a gospel, right? And they take it the wrong way. They take it as like surface and direct, and they're running off with it, just like you're talking about with the white pride stuff, which is hilarious, but also like scary, because there's a lot of stuff in the punk rock world where there's no real rules, that punk rock as we've kind of known it has not really like had those guardrails. So people were doing some pretty wild stuff. And if you're doing it with kind of tongue in cheek, and then you get this kid who's like 17, 18 years old and is really seeing that as like, that's how I actually feel. Right? Like, and they're just taking it straight up and running with it and turning it into something totally different. That's
Yeah.
like scary.
Well, it's like Mike Judge was on the show a couple weeks ago
Mm-hmm.
and was talking about making that 7-inch. And actually, that 7-inch apparently was mainly inspired by Tim Yohannan and trying to piss
Really?
off Tim Yohannan. Yeah. He thought the way that he treated Youth of Today was bullshit in his eyes.
Oh,
And
yeah.
he's like, oh, yeah, you want to see something scary? I'll show you something scary. And then he said some of the other lyrics were directed at members of Youth of Today, too. Um, but, and then fast forward a little bit, and he's seeing these kids that don't have the context for this and are just screaming these words back at him. And that's part of the reason he left, you said, right? Like, and also Nazis showing up.
Yeah.
Bit of a bummer, too, I imagine. So,
Yeah. I remember the first Judge record. Um, Everybody's excited about that record. It was like really exciting when that came out. But I remember it being like just really like angry, like really different. Like it really threw me. It didn't click with me in the same way that a lot of the other stuff did. Right. And I know the Judge is like the beloved hardcore band of all time to so many people. And that's great, because it is a great record. It just didn't hook me in the way that like sort of the positive lyrics of like Youth of Today or Gorilla Biscuits and those kinds of things did. And I remember the that there was that kind of flavor that you're talking about, because they came around, and that was like the big thing of the time was the Judge record, and there was just this sort of like this energy around it. It was so different. And then I think that was kind of like, for me, the the end of the end of things for me in the like youth crew world, because it's just started to change. And I think that that's kind of what happens when we were talking about Unit Pride before. And I'm sort of thinking this through as I'm talking to you, but I'm thinking that like that Judge record was a turning point. And I think for me, it's kind of the energy I was picking up on in my local scene, is that it was kind of that vibe that was a little bit darker, a little bit heavier, a little bit more judgmental, right? And so I think that's the thing that kind of threw me about that.
I have like friends that were all about 7 seconds, and for them that was Youth of Today.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, well, wait till you hear Judge. That's really going to scare the shit out of you on this. But it's almost like the next generation has to crank it up a notch. And that's
Hmm.
where it's like, well, I guess this is my time to do something else or to figure out what's the next step for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's always like that, right? And I think Jesse Michaels had said some point in the past that there's always this sort of counter to what's going on, right? I don't know if he said that it was like in general, like a reaction, and then the next version changes because of that reaction, like musically, right? But it does feel like the waves of people that come in, and it feels like it's like every 3 to 5 years, right? Like things sort of turn over,
Mm-hmm.
and like the younger kids come up and they're creating their stuff, and there is that like finding themselves, right? And I think that is what we see throughout all these like this history that we have that you're so like brilliantly holding space for constantly. Like there's so much out there that just keeps reacting to what came before, right? And keeps changing things, sometimes for the better, sometimes in my mind, not for the better, which is why Redemption 87 comes in and tries to go backwards. But it's one of those things where it's like that's just the nature of things, right?
Yeah. And I feel like you needed, like in the post Green Day, Rancid, and I guess AFI really explodes years later, but like in that post kind of world, Blink 182 a little bit later, where all these bands have exploded and this music's gotten so accessible. All these songs are
Mm-hmm.
great. Like I love all these bands, but
Yeah.
they've found a way to write songs that appeal to people outside of this community. It's
Mm-hmm.
the next wave of stuff is going to have to be aggressive in the face of that, and it's going to have to,
Mm-hmm.
like, you look at what's happening right now with Turnstile, and you can almost see it happening in real time, where there's like a small scene reaction to the big scene that's happening, where people are
Mm-hmm.
going to tighten ranks and be like, okay, well, this will be our thing, and it's different than that thing that's happening right now because it has to be our little precious thing. And I guess that's why punk and hardcore keeps going, is because there's always like stuff gets too big, and then there's always like a group of kids that are like, well, that's not it, it's this thing.
Yeah. No, that is, and it's interesting too because within that, he says it's gonna be our precious, and I think of like Gollum from Lord of the Rings, or
100%.
going my precious, and it's like you think about that, and that's what we try and do with it. Was trying to hold on to it. It's what I was doing with Redemption 87, trying to hold on to my precious thing that is going to change. Like Redemption 87 is my 1987 music in 1994. The Nerve Agents is hearkening backwards too. It's playing the 1987 hardcore with a whole bunch of other stuff on top of it, like TSOL and Social Distortion, and like all this like sort of darker stuff that doesn't really sit in the youth crew realm, right? So there's a merging of that, and then just like it just keeps sort of changing, right? Because it never really sort of can stay the same. And I think that's really cool, because why would you want it to?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm playing in the band Birdlegs now, and that is like the same thing as I played before, but it's not. It's totally different now, because it's like there's just new stuff, because I've moved on in the world. I've added more stuff to my record collection.
And I love that, because I love, like, yourself, Chris Callahan. There's like vocalists that have done multiple different bands over the course of their career, where they're a lead vocalist, so they're going to be able to do their style of things, but then it's evolving that style
Mm-hmm.
within your world, right? And I feel like that's why I was almost like, oh, I wish Rollins had kept going, because I would love to have seen what the next act would have been
Sure.
musically.
Yeah.
Because I think like that's part of the thing about being a fan, is to get to follow this person through their evolution, like you would in film, right? Like you look at the first Kubrick stuff, like Paths of Glory to Eyes
Yeah.
Wide Shut, you get to see how he's adapting his style and evolving his style. And I feel like that's what I love doing with vocalists. Probably because I'm a vocalist that's only had one band, really, that's worth noting. So, like, you know, haven't really been able to stretch my wings as much as I would like to.
Damian, there's still time. There's still time.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if the world's ready for my ska band.
I love that. Yeah, I'm ready for your ska band.
Redemption 94.
There you go. Perfect. Yeah. We're going to sound a little like No Doubt. And yeah.
Mercifully, I was into Redemption 87 by that point. So I steered clear of the third wave ska full envelopment. Luckily, the Youth Crew envelopment happened, which might be just as culturally appropriative when I think about it, because really what ownership did I have of East Coast 80s hardcore culture? But, you know, I digress. Eric, this has been awesome. And anytime you want to come back on this show, you are always welcome.
I'll come back anytime. Anytime you'll have me. I'm around. I'm not going anywhere, I hope.